Hi, and welcome to week 2 of the spring semester of the year 2020. My name is William Hart, and you are watching the first of 2 parts of the lecture for the course entitled English Interview and Presentation at the University of Seoul. If you are joining us for the second week in a row, that means that you have watched the lectures for the first week, you've been registered since the first week, and you're also watching this right now. If that is the case, then that means that you have decided to stay in this course despite all of my warnings. So congratulations, yay! I'm very happy to see you here, and I very much look forward to the time that we will spend together over the next several months in this course. If you are just joining us now in week 2, then I highly recommend that you pause or stop this video now and go back and watch the lectures for week 1, or at least go through the syllabus very carefully. Okay? The reason is, there are always a handful of students, several students, who drop this course during the first week after they have seen the orientation and gone through the syllabus, and after they have discovered how much work this course involves. Because this course does involve a lot of work. This is not an easy course. It's a hard one. Okay, this is a difficult course. It's a demanding course. The course does require a lot of work and dedication, and so if you are just joining us now, again, I highly recommend that you stop and go watch the lectures for the first week and make sure you know what you've gotten yourself into in registering for this course, and what you need to mentally prepare for, because guess what? Now you're here and there's no escape. Ha ha ha. So welcome back. Okay. For this week, before we get started, there are a few things that you'll need to download and either print out or have ready to access on some kind of device. So please, in the EduClass, open up the Documents room. That's the 자료실, and you'll see 2 things. One is a PDF file for the PPT that I will use for this lecture. And the other is another PDF which includes information about the interview test. So first of all, the PPT file, which is actually in PDF form, the name of this document is IP Week 2 2020.1. And IP is a secret code, which means interview and presentation. So yeah, that is the PDF version of the PPT file that I'll be using for the course content for today. And the other file is entitled IP Week 2 Interview Test Info. And this is a document that has all the information you'll need about your final exam, including some guidelines for the test, scoring information, and the questions that will be on the test, and we'll be going through all of that today. That's actually the first thing on our list of priorities for today. So please get those documents. If you decide to print them out, and that's fine, if you decide to print them out, I want to recommend do not print out the PPT file with 1 page per slide. That would really be a waste of paper, waste of resources, a waste of a little bit of ink. What I do is I usually do 6 slides per page. You can set that in your printer settings when you click on the print function. But you guys can probably fit more slides per page because I'm guessing that your eyes are much better than mine. For this week, we don't really have that many slides. I think there are about 15. Yeah, 15 slides for this week. You might be able to fit all of those on one page. Who knows? I mean, you could fit them on one page, certainly. But the question is, can you read the words? And is there enough space for you to take some notes if you need to take some notes? So anyway, please go prepare those two things and come back. Ready? I'll pause and wait for you. Pause. Okay, and welcome back. We're going to start off by looking at that PPT. Okay, if you open it up, you'll see Interview and Presentation, Spring 2020, Week 2 Plan. Now, I always use PPT for the class, especially for our preparation classes. Now, if you recall last week, we went over the syllabus and I went over the weekly schedule. So you should remember how this works. You should be familiar with how this works. We have an alternating schedule with 1 week of presentation preparation and then the next week of actual presentations. Okay? So on the days of presentation preparation, you will need your book. We'll do some activities from the book, and I will use PPT to go through everything we need for that day. And then for the following week, we will all, not we, but all the students, all of you, will be doing a presentation, and that's the only thing we do for that presentation day, right? Just presentations, totally dedicated to presentations. Without any lecture content or PPT at all. So on those presentation days, no books are required. Okay? So if you take a look at the PPT, which I use often, you'll see a list of the activities I have in store for you for today. Okay? At the top, it says Interview Test Information. I'm going to start off by talking about the interview test. Then later, after we go through the test, I am going to be introducing a special project to you. That project is called Presentation Appreciation. And as I explained last week, this is something that each of you will be doing once during the semester. This is, of course, if we can start meeting offline. And I'm going to give you everything you need to know about that project and what it entails of you. And also, I am going to show you an example. I'm actually going to do exactly what you will be doing in the class. Okay, and that's the second thing we need to do for today. And then, with any time we have remaining, I'm going to be doing a little preview of your textbook. And just to remind you, your textbook looks like this. So you should have this as soon as possible. We will hopefully be getting to look at it today. If not, we will absolutely begin using it next week, whether we're meeting online or offline. So please make sure you get this book as soon as possible. It is available in the campus bookstore, of course. So if you have access to campus, or you have access to someone who has access to campus, and if you can do this safely, of course, safety is our prime concern right now, then you can get it at the bookstore. If not, it's available online. Should be easy to find. If you have any problems getting it, let me know. You can write a question on the Q&A board, and we'll figure it out. Okay, but we will hopefully be going through a little bit of this today. So I hope that you can get this and have it as you watch through that part of the lecture today, so you can follow along with me. I wish there were a better way of doing things, but that's how we're going to do it for now. So let's get started with today's content, shall we? Okay. As I said, we're going to start off by looking at the interview test. So now would be a great time to pull out that document, which is a PDF file. Again, IEP Week 2 interview test. Now, let's take a look. This is usually something we would talk about much later, actually, in the semester, because your interview test is not until the final week of the semester. Most of the course is taken up by presentations and getting ready for those presentations. And as I explained last week, the bulk of this course, the meat of this course, the focus of this course is on presentations, developing presentation skills and giving presentations, okay? But the interview aspect is, of course, part of the course as well. It's a minor focus of the course, and it's right there in the title of the course, English Interview, and Presentation. And so what we're going to do is this. Instead of looking at these questions week by week and looking at the exam instructions at the end of the semester, as I usually do, I'm going to give you everything today. Okay, and the reason is we don't quite know what's going to happen with this course. We don't know exactly when we're going to be going offline. Could be sooner, could be later. But once we do get offline, once we do get into the classroom, I want to use the time that we have together in the best way that we can. Okay? And that means using that time for discussion activities, communication activities, presentation preparation activities, and of course also presentation time for you to present. Okay? The interview aspect of the course is a perfect amount of content that we can do here online, because even though the interview questions are a nice thing to practice in class, at the end of the day, it's going to be you taking the test, okay, alone, or perhaps with a partner. You have that option too. So this would be quite a suitable thing for us to do here in the online sessions. Okay, so let's take a look at the guidelines for the test first. It will be an interview test, of course, and it will be one-on-one with me, and it will last approximately 5 minutes. Now, as I said, you will have the option of taking the test together with a friend or a classmate, if you wish. And I give this option every semester, and there are always some students who do feel better, more comfortable to be in the room with another classmate to kind of offer each other support during the test, and that's fine. Okay, if you want to come in with a friend, you sign up for a 10-minute slot together, come in together, and if you feel better doing it just one-on-one, well, that's okay too. Whatever you like, basically. And you have a set of questions which you now have. You are now looking at them. They're on the bottom of the page. We're going to be going through them today. I'll be giving you some advice about how to answer and think about these questions, and then you'll have the whole remainder of the semester to practice them. Now, depending on the time we have together in the classroom, we may also occasionally do some of these questions as a little warm-up in class. Okay? Maybe, as I said, if we have the time, but we'll just have to see how that goes. Okay? Anyway, for your test, the way it works is there are 10 questions, and you get one. All right? It's chosen randomly. I have a random number generator app on my phone. I'll choose one question, and you answer. You can speak for as long or as short as you want, and I will listen carefully to you, and once you are finished with your answer, I'll ask some follow-up questions. Perhaps one, perhaps two, depends on how much you speak for your initial answer. Okay? And of course, the follow-up questions will be based on what you've said. Okay? And that means, to a certain extent, you will be able to prepare for this test. Okay? I do have many students who write out a full and extensive answer to each of these 10 questions, and memorize those answers. And that's fine, okay? So to a certain extent, you can prepare, you can come prepared no matter what question you get, but the format of the test also allows for some creativity on your part, some degree of thinking on your feet, of responding to perhaps some unexpected questions, okay, because I will ask follow-up questions. I'm not going to ask anything crazy, right? My follow-up questions will be based on what you say, but to some degree you will need to think on your feet. That means think in the moment and speak, okay? And so that's how the test works, and it's 5 minutes, okay? Usually no more than that, maybe 5 or 6 minutes at most, okay? So really quite short. And remember that I'm only calling it the final exam because it happens to be the last exam that you take. And it's of course also the first exam that you will take for this class. It's the only exam. So by definition it is the final exam, but it's not a final exam in the sense of measuring everything you've done for the course or evaluating your performance over the course of the semester, because most of what you do for this semester will be related to presentations, and your evaluations and assessments of your presentations will be given to you week by week as you present. Okay, the interview portion of the course is completely separate from that. Okay, so again, it's not a measure of what you've learned in the course. It's just kind of practice for interviews in the real world. Okay, so if we go down to scoring, you'll see that it's not worth very much. It's only worth 10% of your grade, which actually is exactly how much each presentation is worth. Remember, you'll be giving 6 formal presentations, formally assessed presentations, and each of those is worth 10 points. And so this interview test is worth the same as any one individual presentation. Okay? I'm going to evaluate you holistically according to 4 criteria. These criteria are for content, quantity, fluence, coherence. Okay, content is the meaning of your answer, the ideas that you give. So were your answers meaningful, logical, intelligent, thoughtful, and sophisticated? It's the content of what you say. Next is the quantity. Did you speak a lot? Okay, if you want to maximize your performance for quantity, then you would speak for 5 straight minutes. Okay, but there's no need to do that, of course, because I will be asking follow-up questions. But if you wanted to maximize your quantity performance, that would be the way to do it. Just speak a lot. Next is fluency. Okay, and that is specifically for this test. That means did you speak smoothly and continuously without pauses, without stutters or corrections or repairs, or repetitions? Okay, that's the fluency of your speech. Fluency in general, of course, you say, oh, my sister is very fluent at French. That just means she can speak French well. Okay, well, here, for your test, fluency has a specific meaning. It's about the smoothness of your stream of speech. And finally, coherence. Did you communicate your ideas effectively? Okay, did you take your content and present it in a way that was easy for me to understand? Okay, now notice there's no pronunciation here. There's no grammar listed here as part of the criteria. You have 4 criteria and 4 criteria only. Okay, that's the ideas, the content, the amount, the quantity, the smoothness, which is fluency, and the clarity, which is the coherence. Okay? Now remember, I'm going to be grading you holistically, which means a single score which evaluates your performance as a whole. Okay? I'm not going to give, 10, it's not 10 for content, 10 for quantity, 10 for fluence, 10 for coherence. Not like that. Okay? I give you one score considering all of these criteria as a whole. And that means you might be weak for one of the criteria. Okay? Maybe your fluency was not so great on that day. Okay? But you can make up for that by, extraordinary performance in other areas. For example, if your content is really outstanding, that can outbalance the weakness that you showed in fluency. Okay? And that's what it means to be a holistic score. It's a score that evaluates your performance as a whole, not specifically by adding up numbers from each criteria. And if you have any questions about that, of course, you're welcome to ask them on the Q&A board in the EduClass. Okay, and finally, I have the questions for you. These are actually the questions that I'm going to use for the interview test, so you can start thinking about these questions and practicing these questions today. And actually, you will have a chance to answer one of them for your assignment. If you've checked out your assignment for this week, then you'll see that the first question is actually connected to the interview test. Why don't we take a look at that right now, okay? Now would be a good time to go over and open up the assignment submission site on the EduClass page, and I believe that's called 과제 제출. It's the final thing on your menu, I think, for EduClass. Anyway, let's take a look. For week 2, you have 2 questions. And remember, submitting these answers, okay, submitting your assignment is the way we take attendance for these online classes. So absolutely, please, you must remember to submit your answers to these questions on time if you want to get attendance credit for the week. If you submit them on time, you're present. If you don't, you're absent, so please be careful. Anyway, your first question is about the interview test. Your job will be to just choose one and answer it. That's it, okay? You can choose any question here except the first one, because you might notice that the first question is the question that you answered last week. Okay? So you can choose any question from 2 through 10 and answer as your first assignment question. Again, you can write as little or as much as you want. It's up to you. Okay, so let's take a look at these questions. Now we have 10 questions. The first, again, number 1, can you tell me a little about yourself? Which was your question from last week. Now remember, the whole point of this interview phase of the course, this interview portion of the course, is to spend some time developing interview skills by thinking about the types of questions that are very often asked during corporate job interviews. Now, every job interview, of course, will probably be mainly focused on things specific to your field. Okay? However, there are also types of questions that are very commonly asked across all fields of employment. And these are more general questions that deal with who you are as a person and who you will be as an employee, because employers want to know who you are and how it will be to have you working for them in their company. Okay? They want to find the best people they can get, and that doesn't always mean the people with the highest exam scores or whatever. They need to find people that are good fits for their company. Okay, people that they know will fit in well there and get along well and help them make money, basically. And so you need to think about this as you think about the questions, because there may be certain things that companies are looking for and other things that certain companies are looking to avoid when they hear answers to these questions. So the ones I've given you are 10 of the most common ones, and we're going to be looking at some of them in detail today. Okay, so instead of reading all the questions on the list right now, I'm going to ask you to go back to the lecture file. That's the PDF for the lecture PPT, which we looked at briefly before, right? The IP Week 2 2020.1. And I'd like you to go on to slide number 2, which says questions of the day. Okay. Now, as I said, ordinarily, if these were normal times, we'd be looking at these 2 questions for today, and that's it, right? And the next time, 2 weeks later, we'd look at the next few questions, and then 2 weeks later, we'd look at the next few questions, and so on. And we'd be doing that as warm-up activity. But today, we're going to do it all in one chunk, okay? We're going to look at all the questions, and I'm going to give you a little advice, a few things to think about when you answer these questions, and hopefully you can practice some of these questions at home. Now, starting today, for as long as we do online activities, I will be asking some questions and engaging in some kind of interactive communication activities. Now, of course, this is difficult to do online, okay? These are things that we ordinarily do in a classroom, okay? So it's going to be tough, but I want to encourage you to do your best and find a way to participate in these communication activities, okay? If I ask a question, just shout out and answer. You don't have to shout. You might scare your mom, or you might scare the other people at Starbucks or wherever you are. You can speak out your answer, but in my actual classroom, it's a lively place, okay? There are people shouting out answers and ideas all the time. So please, if I ask a question, actually use your voice and speak out, speak up to the screen. Now, if it's just you and your computer screen, that's fine, right? Just talk to me, talk to the image of me that you see on the screen. If you can do these kinds of speaking activities with an actual living being, that might be a little bit better. And that might mean you talking to a mirror. Yeah, kind of weird, I know. Or perhaps talking to your pet dog, or your pet cat, or your pet hamster, or your teddy bear. Those are other options. And I know that's, sure, it might feel strange, might feel funny, might feel silly, but it's better than nothing, right? You need to open up your mouth and try to speak. It would be very good practice, just as you would if we were in the classroom. Of course, better than a teddy bear or a cat would be an actual person. So if there's someone in your family who you can talk to in English, it would be great to practice some of these things with them. Okay? Just even having a person there listening and watching you as you answer these questions can be helpful. And the best thing you can do, actually, would be to find another classmate. Someone from this class, if possible, or if not, someone from your major, one of your friends from school, one of your friends from your hometown, you know, any person who you can communicate with. Of course, if you can meet with that person face to face safely, then that would be fine, that would be great. If not, you can use Skype, you can use Kakao Talk. There are many ways we have available now, many types of technology we can use. But again, I do highly recommend when we do some speaking activities or when I ask you questions, I really recommend that you find somebody to do them with or some way to do it that will allow you to get some speaking practice in. Okay? So for today we're going to begin with these first 2 questions. And these, of course, are questions 2 and 3 on the list of questions because we've already covered the first question in your homework last week. And the first question for today, what are some of your greatest strengths? And number 2, what do you consider to be your weaknesses? Okay, these are the two of the most commonly asked questions at job interviews. And before you practice them, I'm going to give you a few tips in thinking about these questions. So why don't we go on and continue to the next page. Okay, we're now on page 3 of the file. So helpful tips. Maybe these tips are helpful, maybe not. Okay, but here are some ideas thinking about these questions. For your greatest strengths, okay, I'm going to say 4 things. Okay, be accurate, be relevant, be specific, and follow up. Be accurate. We'll start there. Okay, the idea is, read from the page, show your true strengths, not just what you think interviewers want to hear. Okay, in general, I always recommend that you be as honest as possible to a certain limit. We'll talk more about that when we look at weaknesses, but your big aim is to give an honest portrayal of who you are as a person and who you will be as an employee. And your challenge is to communicate that to your potential employer. Okay? Now that might not be easy. It might not be easy to show your true self and your true abilities and your true interests, but that should be your goal. Now, a lot of people who are preparing for interviews, they do a lot of research trying to figure out what are the best answers to questions like these. What are the best ways to answer these questions? They do research on the company and they want to figure out what is this company looking for, because that's what I need to give them. Okay? Now, it is very true that you and the company are both looking for a good fit, a good match. You want to find a place that's right for you, and that company wants to find employees that are right for that company. And actually, there's really no way for you to know exactly what they're looking for particular positions. Okay? And if you misrepresent yourself, if you present yourself in one way, in a way that you think they're looking for, and you do that very well, you present yourself, you study, you prepare, and you show yourself as this person that you think they're looking for, well, you may be right, and they might be looking for that person. But guess what? If you get hired, and that person is not actually who you are, you're going to have trouble. Okay? You're going to have trouble at the job. The company's going to have trouble with you. And you could potentially be miserable. I know many, many people who have gotten excellent jobs, their dream jobs at their dream companies, and wound up miserable because they had to be somebody which they really weren't. They had to live up to some picture of themselves that they had presented from the beginning that didn't really match who they were. Okay? So, again, in general, I really recommend that you try to show yourself as you are in order to communicate to that company who you are, because who knows, maybe that is who they're looking for. And if you can be successful in this and showing who you are and what your abilities and your skills and your strengths are, and if that is what they're looking for, then you could potentially have a wonderful career in front of you. And you could be very happy as an employee at that company. And that's what we're striving for, really. In addition to making lots of money, right? Of course. Of course. So be accurate. That's what accurate means. Show yourself. Like Elsa, right? If you've seen Frozen 2. Yeah, I'm not going to sing. Don't worry. Okay, and the next one is be relevant. Okay, Choose strengths relevant to the particular position you are applying for. Okay? You might be really good at League of Legends, right? You might have an outstanding rank, platinum or whatever. I don't know anything about League of Legends, but maybe you're like an almost pro level. Well, that's awesome. You know, that's very impressive, but does that have anything to do with this particular position? Maybe, but if not, don't mention it, okay? You want to stick to the things that are relevant for that particular job, and especially stick to the questions they give you. They might end up asking you about your hobbies and your interests and other things, and in that case, go for it. Give them what they ask for, okay? But try to stick to the questions that they ask and answer what they ask. Okay? Otherwise, they might be annoyed and have doubts about you. Next is be specific. Okay? Simply be specific. Okay? When you talk about your strengths, avoid general statements that are too general. Okay? We'll talk more about that when we look at cliche answers in the weaknesses section. But keep in mind that they're going to probably be interviewing many people for this position, and they want to know what makes you different from the others. Okay? Why you in particular, what skills you have and what you're going to bring to the table. If you say something like, I'm a people person. I'm really good at talking. I have excellent communication skills. That might be true. Okay, and it should be true if you say it. Okay, but there are going to be many people who also say similar things. Many people who have good communication skills, who are good at talking. So give them something more specific. Okay, help them understand more about how that skill will be valuable to them. For example, okay, you might say something, these are on the slide there, you might say something like, I'm very persuasive when trying to convince people. And that would be good in a sales position, perhaps. Or you might say, I have an uncanny knack of being able to explain the fine points of economic theory to lay people. That means people, the average person on the street who has no expertise in this area. Okay, I have a great ability to take complex ideas and synthesize them and summarize them in an easily accessible way to people who don't know the professional terminology and have that knowledge. Okay? And so on, right? Be specific about the skills that you have, because if you're too general, then you're not really giving them any information about yourself. Okay? They want to know specifically what are the group of skills that you are bringing to the table. Okay? And finally, we have the follow-up, which is something that you should have prepared. Okay? But you don't have to necessarily spit it out right away. Okay, so follow-up says, describe how this strength has been useful to you in a professional or academic setting. Tell a simple anecdote to illustrate your point. Okay, and again, you don't know what kind of interview it's going to be. They might have many questions they want to get through, and in which case you should be able to answer each question clearly and effectively and briefly to let them move on with the interview, because they do have probably many other people to see and limited time to do it. But if they ask you, oh, really? Or, go on, or even just, raise an eyebrow to indicate that they are curious about something you said, you should have something more ready to continue. Examples about experiences that you can share about this skill and how it's been useful to you. Okay, and this will kind of fill in the picture for them, giving them a better picture not only of the skills that you have, but about how those skills might be helpful to them at their actual company. So have stories ready to tell them. And I'm going to be giving you some advice about how to tell stories a little bit later. We look at some other questions. Anyway, those are a few things to think about when you consider your greatest strengths. Okay? And now we'll move on to the second question, which is about weaknesses, right? So let's move on to the next slide. We're now on slide 4. And for slide 4, the idea is to talk about your weaknesses, okay? So again, I have some helpful question mark tips. These tips might be helpful to you, maybe not, but here they are. Okay, first, be honestly self-critical. Okay, next, don't raise any red flags. And finally, avoid cliche answers. All right? First, be honestly self-critical. Again, honesty. This has to do with be accurate, that I mentioned before. Show yourself, like Elsa. Describe a weakness that is real and show how you are working to overcome it. Think of your weaknesses as your future strengths. Okay, next, do you have any weaknesses? Do you have weaknesses that you're not working on? Start now. Okay, so again, the idea is be honest, right? Show who you really are, and don't just tell them what's wrong with you. Okay, the idea is to show them how you take a weakness and develop it. Okay, show them how you face problems in life, especially problems related to yourself. Okay, we all have weaknesses, sure, but how do we deal with them? How do we conquer them? How do we become better people? Okay, these are the things that they want to know about you. Okay, so yes, choose something real. Okay, but choose something that you've been aware of for a long time and that you have conquered or are in the process of conquering. Okay, this will show them that yes, you have problems just like anybody. You're not a perfect person. Because you're honest, you're actually showing them that you're human, but that also you know how to deal with problems. You know how to change and become better and strengthen yourself and develop yourself into something better. Okay? And all of you, most of you, should have things like this already in your life. You're adults. Okay? You've already been through many struggles, many problems, and worked to overcome them. However, some of you are younger than others in the class, okay? And some of you may feel that you know your weaknesses, but you've never been able to do anything about them, okay? And first of all, in the interview, don't mention those, okay? That's probably one of the worst things you can do is just say, well, this is my problem. I can never wake up on time. And that's it. That's why I'm late today. Sorry. Yeah, don't use those in your interview answer. That's too honest. This is why I said be honest within limits, within reason, okay? But my point is, if you do have weaknesses that you have identified, you know yourself, you know these weaknesses, you have them, now is the time to start working on them. Okay? This is just a course. This course is a kind of training and practice for real life. But that real life is not here yet, fortunately for you. Right now is the time to think about your weaknesses and start working on them. Okay, now by the time you actually reach the interview portion of your employment search, and that will be sooner for some of you and much later for others of you, okay, if you start working on your weaknesses now, then by the time you actually get to that interview room, you should have more to say about how you've worked on and pushed through and developed yourself and conquered or are in the process of conquering these weaknesses. Okay, so my message to you is start now. Okay, and if you really don't know what your weaknesses are, now is the time to start thinking about that. Okay, because none of us are perfect. Okay, we all have things we can improve. Okay. The next point of advice I have is don't raise any red flags. Okay, let's take a look at the notes. Employers do use this question, right? What are your weaknesses? They do use this question to weed out, that means get rid of or eliminate, right? Like cutting weeds in a garden. It's kind of a harsh expression, but to weed out people with undesirable qualities. So avoid mentioning red flag qualities. Okay? Yes, okay, there are some things, some types of weaknesses which really make some people highly unsuitable for most professional employment environments. So think carefully about your weaknesses because some of them might fit into that category. For example, the example I've given is, oh, actually, I'm really bad with deadlines. Now, you may have some professional fields where deadlines don't matter. I can't think of any right now, but there may in fact be such a field. However, in almost every other field of employment and every other profession, deadlines do matter. And so if you say something like this, probably they already in their mind they're thinking, next. Okay, that's a red flag. It's a red flag that says, okay, this person, no good, move along. Okay. And guess what? If you do have some of those red flag qualities, again, those could be things that you can fix. Those can be things that you can overcome. And if you haven't yet, then now is the time to start, right? No time like the present, as the expression goes. And finally, okay, the third tip I have here is avoid cliche answers. Okay, cliche answers are the types of answers that these employers have heard many, many times. If you do research online, especially research about interview questions and how can I answer this question, these are the types of answers that experts say, oh, this is the perfect way to answer this question. Oh, this is really clever. You're really going to knock their socks off with this answer. It's so cute. It's not. Okay? These are cliche answers. They've been heard by the employers again and again and again, which means two things. Number one, you're not really telling them anything about you. Okay, because they've heard these so many times, they cease having meaning. And number two, you are actually kind of avoiding the question with many cliche answers. So, for example, look at the first one. I work too hard. I have heard so many people give this response to this question, or the second one. I'm a perfectionist. Okay, these are what I call fake weaknesses. As I said, I've heard these two particular answers many, many times in response to this question. What are your weaknesses? Oh, I work too hard. And they're fake weaknesses because they're not really weaknesses. They're strengths disguised as weaknesses, right? When you say I work too hard, you want to make it sound like, oh yeah, that's not too good. It could be unhealthy, and I know that's a bad thing. But what you're really saying is, hey, I'm a hard worker. Choose me because I work really hard. Hey, haha. And the same with perfectionist, right? You're kind of saying in a fake way, like, oh yeah, this is a negative quality to be a perfectionist because things can never be totally perfect, and so I put too much pressure on myself, and that gives me stress. But what you're actually saying is, you're bragging. You're saying, hey, I do everything perfect. I work really hard. I look at the details. I'm going to be the best worker you ever have. Ha, ha, ha. It's fake, okay? Fake weaknesses. What you're really saying is this third example, I'm just way too awesome and amazing, so my coworkers tend to be jealous of me, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, avoid those answers. As I said, giving those answers tells the employer nothing new. They've heard these many, many times before. They're sick of these answers, okay? These answers will probably turn them off to you in general, and they're fake. You're not really answering the question, okay? Again, what they're looking for is actual weaknesses, honest weaknesses. Okay, they want to know who you are as a person, and this helps to fill out the picture of you as a person. And they also want to know how you've been working to overcome these weaknesses and develop yourself in response to these problems. Okay, so keep that in mind. And now I will give you a little time. I'm actually going to wrap up this first half of our lecture, but I'm going to ask you to look at these two questions once again. So now we're on page 5 of the PPT, and there are the two questions again for you. I've given you some advice, I've given you some things to think about, and now I'd like you to take some time and actually practice. Okay, if you need to, take some time to think about your answers. You might have to, reflect, look into yourself, look deep inside, to find the goods and the bads, and also reflect upon your experiences at university, perhaps in any internships or employment situations you've had, and do your best to compose answers to these two questions. Again, number one, what are some of your greatest strengths? And number two, what do you consider to be your weaknesses? Okay, and we'll stop there for this half. Okay, this has been the first part of the lecture for week 2, and we will continue on in the second part of the lecture for week 2 by looking at 2 more interview questions. Okay, so good luck with your speaking practice, and I will see you soon.